Hey everybody, welcome back to the Anyway Whatever podcast. I'm your host, Mike Fisher, and today's guest is actor Keir Gilchrist. I know Keir a little bit from the music scene and a little bit from acting, as he is the star of Netflix TV show Atypical, where he plays the main character, Sam. And my wife works on that show as a hairstylist. Anybody who listens to the show knows that my wife is a Hollywood hairstylist. And I know Keir a little bit from the music scene, as he is the singer in the grindcore band Whelm and the death metal band Phalanx. And we we somehow over the years kind of bumped into each other in a bunch of different places. Keir's a great guy, super nice, and I was happy that he was able to sit down and talk with me before production begins on his next TV show. As always, if you are watching on YouTube, hit subscribe and click the little bell to make sure you get updates. Share, like, comment on the episode. And if you are listening to the podcast version of this, hit subscribe wherever it is you get your podcast content, and make sure to give us a review. And as always, sharing episodes is a really good way to help us get the word out about the show. And the support has been amazing so far. The show has grown faster than I could have ever imagined. And we have merch, of course. You can find the links to the t-shirts that come to us through Warlord Clothing and the merch, pins, stickers, stuff like that. The links are in the description below. And yeah, enjoy this episode with Keir. It was really cool to sit down and talk with him. He's a very, very talented guy in a lot of areas. So I think people are going to really dig it. Hey everybody, welcome back to the Anyway Whatever podcast. I'm your host, Mike Fisher, as always, and today's guest is Keir Gilchrist, actor, musician, all-around rad dude. How you doing, man?
I'm doing fine, just taking everything day by day and feeling very zen about all of it, unfortunately, getting through it.
Yeah, for sure. Me and Keir know each other a little bit from the LA music scene, and a little bit from my wife, as everybody who listens knows, is a hairdresser in Hollywood. And so she does TV and films, and she was one of the hairstylists on the Netflix show Atypical that Keir is the star of. And so there's like it's like a little family connection there between like work and music and stuff like that. So I was stoked that when you said you'd come on, man. I'm curious to I'm looking forward to getting caught up. We haven't talked in a while.
Yeah, I was stoked when you asked me. Weirdly enough, I've done multiple podcasts and none of them have ever actually seen the light of day. So this is my first ever podcast debut, and yeah, it was so funny because when Christy and I started talking, Christy was like, "Oh, Mike's like in this band Destroyed in Seconds. I don't know if you've heard of them." And I was like, "Oh yeah," or was in this band. She saw that I'm into crust and stuff like that. And then funny enough, we were living literally across the street from each other while we were shooting. Like you could throw a rock from my place to your guys' place, and it was so random. Like I think we just saw you guys walking the dog one day, and it was like, holy shit, you're right there.
Yeah, totally. I think that you guys kind of figured out the street in Echo Park that was our back gate, and Keir's front gate was on a street called Laguna, and there was a war between this one like kind of gangster dude and this other just like Texas redneck dude, and they were constantly going at each other, and like sometimes they were like actually throwing blows and stuff. And I think you and Chris, you came in and you were like, "God, these dudes on my street were like fighting," and she's like, "Wait a minute, there were dudes fighting on my street. Where do you live?" And then you guys figured out that we literally lived across the street from each other.
Yeah, no, it was those guys constantly all the time. Like I'd wake up to just them like fist fighting in the street, and then they would get arrested, and then everything would go back to normal for like another few weeks, and then they would fist fight again. And yeah, no, it was so funny. And then, yeah, we realized we were right across from each other.
Yeah, that was at the time when Echo Park, like there was so many like grind and death metal guys like living in that neighborhood like all at the same time. Like Leon from Exhumed and Terrorizer was in the neighborhood. You were in the neighborhood. You're in Whelm and Phalanx. I was in the neighborhood. The guys from Colombian Necktie were in the neighborhood. And Kevin from Behold the Monolith was also in the neighborhood. Rest in peace. He passed away. But yeah, there was like a time when like all of us were like, you know, probably a block away from each other, like a bunch of us. That was super fun.
Yeah, no, it's wild. I mean, I think, you know, obviously prices have gone up, so everybody's kind of drifted off from that area. But there was a point there where you'd always see somebody and be like, oh, that's a cool backpatch. Who is that, you know?
Totally. Beers down at the Gold Room.
Oh, yeah. Wasn't there a Gold Room incident where that guy, there was that stabbing and then he ran up our street, actually, I think. And
he ran up Echo Park Avenue and decided to pound on our foyer window so that we would let him in to get away from the police. And everybody in our building was like, dude, we're not letting you in here. He's like, I just stabbed somebody. You got to let me in. We're like, what?
Sounds good, man. Come on in.
Yeah. And then he was so drunk, he went back to the Gold Room and the police were there and they arrested him.
Yeah, he like tried to order another drink, I think, or something like that. Yeah, I mean, like I can't say I fully missed that version of Echo Park, but some part of me is like, it was kind of a fun minute there where, you know, it was pretty wild.
Yeah, you know, we drive back through now, and it's like once the park was done being renovated, the rents went way up and the murder rate went way down. And now you go and it's like everything's changed. Like all of the businesses are different. There's like hardly any small stuff now. It's like big chains and hipstery stuff, and buildings have been torn down and rebuilt, and it's crazy that Echo Park got hella gentrified in the last 5 years.
Yeah, no, it's definitely not. I mean, when I first moved there, it was like almost 10 years ago, and it was such a different, you know, and I have people who live there now and they're like, it's so nice. And I'm like, yeah, it definitely is. But I'm like, yeah, you have no idea what this place looked like 10 years ago, you know?
Dude, yeah, like one time when my sons were like teenagers in the mid 2000s, like I went down there to buy them mini bikes, like right in our old neighborhood, and it was still like gangster. And that, you know, in like 2005, it was still super, super gangster. And then when me and Christy moved there in 2010, it was already on the upswing. And then, yeah, once they renovated the park, it was over. It was like super over.
Yeah, my first place there, I remember there was you know, my neighbors, I don't know what they were up to, but there was like a drive-by and all these bullets like went flying into my front yard, and like all my neighbors were like, hey, did you find any bullets and whatever, like in the front yard and all this stuff. And yeah, now it's a very different place.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, we're all the way out here in the valley. It's like, you know, we still get the police helicopter once in a while, but for the most part, it's pretty quiet out here. So wanted to, you started acting as a kid. Was that something, cause you're originally from Canada, right? Like Toronto area?
Technically I'm originally from England. I moved from London when I was 6 to Boston, and then from Boston to New York, and then from New York to Toronto. But my parents are both from Canada, so I kind of always was in Canada as a kid.
So when you started acting, did you start acting there and then that moved you out to California? Like, or how did that whole thing come about? Because you started acting when you were pretty young, yeah?
Yeah, I started acting 18 years ago, so I was 10, and kind of just this fluke thing where I was at the Boys and Girls Club near my mom's house, and went down there, and they were like, oh, there's, you know, I was in this drama class, and they were like, there's an open call audition, you should go. And I was like, okay, I'll go. and then got an agent from that, and then ended up on this. The first American show was called The Winner. It was like Rob Corddry, and Seth MacFarlane was producer, and that kind of brought me down here and got me my first work permit. And then I got the show United States of Terra. And so I was on that when I was like 17, 18, and I was debating either moving to New York or LA, and met a bunch of people out here around that time. And I was like, okay, I want to move to LA. So yeah, that's what brought me here.
So when you were like in school and stuff, you were still in Canada. You hadn't come out here full time until after you like got done with school or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah. It was literally, I turned 18 in LA, and that was the first place I like had here, and then stayed here.
Cool. So yeah, which is, I wanted to talk about your music stuff a little bit before we get too deep into the acting stuff. 'Cause I was curious how you found your way into, not a lot of people know. And it's kind of just, it's like, I seem to remember like you kind of came out of the closet not that long ago and started talking about, as an actor, like that you are into like death metal and grindcore and crust punk and like all this extreme kind of metal. And I feel like you said that you kind of kept it a little separate from your acting career because you weren't sure exactly how you would be perceived by fans or by the industry. And so I was curious, being, that I'm into the same stuff, how you got into that music. Because for some reason, I thought that you were in LA since you were a kid, and I was wondering how a child actor ends up listening to that kind of music,
Yeah, well, so my dad was he was like a first wave punk, he was all into Sex Pistols and Buzzcocks and all that stuff. And then sort of, he saw like Bad Brains back in the day, and kind of as hardcore came in, he sort of distanced, he got more into like new wave and rockabilly and stuff. But, he was showing me all this stuff as I was a kid, like The Clash and all this kind of stuff. And then as I got older, he was like, oh, you should check out Minor Threat and Bad Brains and Black Flag. And I really liked that stuff. And so I was like the more heavy stuff kind of, grabbed my attention. And then I was kind of always into it, but I didn't have a lot of friends who were into it, or any really. And then I also was acting at the same time. It was kind of simultaneously happening. And and then it just kind of evolved. It was like I wanted heavier and heavier and heavier and meaner stuff, and so it was sort of always at the same time. Like I used to be, I would be shooting United States of Terra in the Valley, and then I had one friend who was in the punk scene in East LA. So he would say, oh, you got to check out the scene here in East LA, and so I would get on the subway and take it down from Burbank to Union Station, and then he would pick me up, and we'd go to these, in East LA and hang out in like City Terrace and all these places. And I just fell in love with the LA scene because it was so raw, and it definitely experienced things I had never in Toronto. The Toronto punk scene was so much more kind of middle class and safe. And it was venues and stuff. And then once I got out here, I was like, yo, this is the real deal.
The East LA punk scene is my favorite punk scene on planet Earth. I got a chance to tour all over the place with D.I.S. and play in all different countries and all different. You can't beat LA. Like the East LA Latino punk scene rules all punk scenes, because you just never know what you're going to get. Like you might be in a little taco stand watching bands play, or you could just be in some grandma's backyard where the grandkids just are charging kids $5 to get in to watch bands play in the backyard. And it's always, it's always some dirt lot, dusty, crazy, 20 bands, and the cops always show up, and everybody's like having a good time. Yeah, I definitely miss. That's the thing I miss most about not being in a band anymore, is like just being in those spots where you're just like, with your people. The East LA scene brings it for sure.
Yeah, no, I mean, I remember even just being from Canada. I'm from like a middle class neighborhood in Toronto. And the first time I went to see, I was really into that band Society's Parasites. Mm-hmm. I don't know if you remember them, but like I remember somebody just yelling "gun," and like everybody just, running, and then the cops came, and like people are throwing, beer bottles, like smashing them on the hood of the cop car. And I was like, obviously scared, but also just enthralled by it. I was like, this is so sick. This is lawless. This is like, but also just, amongst that, the best people, who truly loved the music. It wasn't just a cool, like, I'm going to stunt and be like a cool, person. It was just like, people were risking a lot these shows.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I have a bunch of friends that are like Lincoln Heights, Boyle Heights, that are like from that scene, and they're totally true, dipped in it to their bones, like punks, and so that's cool that you found your way to the scene over on the east side. I can imagine that must have been just been super fun for you, just like cement it in there. And so when are you still doing Phalanx and Whelm? Or
yeah, I mean, as much as can be right now with the pandemic.
Right. Sure.
I mean, we have stuff written, and we're sort of slowly doing whatnot, but it's hard with, trying to stay safe and everything like that. Yeah. And that's the thing. There's no deadline. So it's weird. It's like, usually you have this deadline, like, okay, we got to get this finished and out by this show, because then we can, now it's kind of like, I respect everybody that's like rocking stuff in quarantine, but, I think we're just kind of slowly, both hands are still, I think.
Because Phalanx came later. When did you guys start Whelm?
Oh my God, it was a long time ago.
It's been a minute.
I met somebody on set, actually, who was an AC, Carmen. And then she was like, oh, you should meet my roommate, like Sean. He loves all the power balance. She likes punk, but like she was like, oh, he likes the power balance, grindcore and stuff, and you should meet. And then we met, and Sean was like, hey, I'm doing a band. Like, have you ever done vocals? And I was like, no, I would love to. And so we, started. It took us forever to get a bass player. It was like almost a year and a half before we could lock down a serious bass player. And our drummer left, and then we had another drummer.
That's how that goes.
No, so
it always goes that way. And then Phalanx kind of started from that, because it's some of the same members, correct?
Yeah. So me and Sean were kind of, with Whelm, we were never really able to tour or anything like that. We couldn't really take it to the next level. Everyone had their careers, and so we were like, well, let's see if we can make a band. And we were listening to a lot of death metal, and we wanted to do something very kind of just primitive and, mean. So Sean and I enlisted Josh Townsend, who was in this band Deadbeat that we would play with all the time, which was like my favorite band in LA. And so he joined, and then, we basically went from there. And the intention being like, let's, do something that we could maybe take to that next level and do some touring and stuff.
That's awesome. I wasn't aware that you were never really in bands before. Well, because you seem like you a natural for it. Maybe some of that has to do with your being an actor and kind of just being comfortable in front of doing your thing in front of people, because that's not a thing everybody is immediately good at, for sure.
Yeah, I think I always kind of, it's funny. I remember telling my mom, I was like, oh, I was playing like some bass and stuff, and I was like, oh, I kind of want to be in one of these bands. And my mom was like, she knowingly was kind of like, you want to be the front person. Like, I know that you do, like, and I was like, yeah, I guess so. And, but yeah, I mean, I never could start a band properly. I tried, but then it's hard when you're working and you're like, you meet some kids in Toronto, and then you leave for 3 months, and then you're back for a month, and then you leave for 3 months. And, I never really was in one place for long enough to properly get started. So, that was the first time that I was like, okay, I'm going to actually commit to this.
Yeah. I really like both of those bands. I think, like, Sean Glaze is one of those people that it's like kind of impossible not to find enjoyable. You know, like you just want to like listen to him and like hang out with him because he's just such a character. He's like a living animated character, which is funny because he's an animator. Yeah, like both of those bands are super, super fun bands. Like, that's not something you're necessarily supposed to say about death metal or power violence bands, but yeah, I'm a fan of both of your bands, and I'm happy that to hear that when this is all over, you guys are you're gonna fire out all those engines back up. I think that's super cool.
Well, yeah, it was weird because with like Phalanx, like we did our new EP and we dropped it, and then we got a booking agent off of it, and it was like real, like he's great, and he came in and was like, let's do this, and we were planning like East Coast and maybe we'll press some vinyl and everything, and then just like at that second, it was like the world just shut down. So we're still sort of fired up and ready to go whenever we can, but it was just it was really interesting timing in that way because we were like, oh, okay, this year is going to be the year that we go and hit all these cities we never have and do it for real. And so we're still locked and loaded basically and ready to go.
That's awesome. That makes me happy to hear that, man. I'm excited for that to go to get moving for you. I know that you're about to start filming Atypical again. I don't think Chrissy's going to be on it this time, just due to like all scheduling stuff. But do you, moving kind of into your acting stuff a little bit, do you have a preference to TV over film?
I think it's interesting because I think much like my music taste, with film, I have a short attention span. It's kind of why I like short, fast, grind and power violence and stuff like that appeal to me. I have a really short attention span for stuff. And so with TV, it's great because it's like a stable job and, you really get the opportunity to explore these characters and stuff. But at the same time, I kind of like a nice indie movie shoot where you're just like in and out, it's like get in there for 2 months or whatever, and then it's done, and then you move on. So as much as I enjoy TV, I think I'm more of a film person personally. Just feels like, locked in, done. I've never really been on a song before, but for sure.
Yeah, we lost you a little bit there, but no, dude, it's totally fine. Like if there is a thing during COVID that is if you're trying to make a podcast, it's just it's part of it comes along with it. It's fine. Yeah, you seem to looking at your IMDb stuff. It seems like you pretty much your movie output is indie stuff pretty much. I know my favorite movie of yours is Stanford Prison Experiment. But that movie's I was as a younger person, I had found out about the Stanford Prison Experiment, so I was like, anybody who doesn't know, just Google the Stanford Prison Experiment, and so I was like aware of it, and then when I found out the movie was out and I watched it, I didn't even know you were in it when the first time I watched it. I absolutely love that movie, man. It is so good, and everybody in it, like all of you guys, Michael Angarano, like everybody just kills it in that movie.
Yeah, that was a really interesting movie too, because I had met with the director about it because there's so many parts, right? And so like everybody kind of just met with Kyle about generally about it, and then time went by. I mean, it took him about 10 years to get that movie made, I believe, from the first script to when we shot it. All of a sudden, like a lot of my friends were getting parts in it, and I mean, we're all the same age, we're all up for the same roles, and we've worked a lot together. And then they kind of asked me like towards the end if I wanted to do a part in it, and I was like, oh, hell yeah. And that was like literally all my friends, like, and everyone was so cool. Like, Ezra Miller, Michael Angarano, like they were all people that I had met and liked before. And so it's weird when I talk about that movie, because it's like, it's such a excruciating experience to watch, but it was such a fun movie to shoot. Like, I can't lie, we had a blast, I mean.
I would hope so, man. Especially considering how intense the story is. Like, it seems like you would have to have fun when you were off camera, because that's some heavy shit.
Yeah, no, basically, I mean, it was like, we were all just hanging out and, joking around. And obviously when we were on set, like, super serious, and, we were in our parts. But I think people almost want me to tell them that it was an excruciating experience to, like, validate, what was going on. But really, it was one of the most fun movies I've ever done. And it was just, I mean, we really were sort of taking part in the experiment. It's like, I got to go in, put my uniform on, strap on the baton and everything. And we were in shifts, like our guard shifts, like we would come in for 6 hours and then we'd go, and the next guard shift would come in, and then the next one. And it was really, really an incredible experience.
Yeah, the movie did the story justice, the story of the true story of what actually happened. Supposedly, I've heard conflicting stuff over the years that it didn't really go like a bunch of different stuff. But based on the story that the story that's always existed, I think that the movie was a pretty perfect portrayal of the tale of the Stanford prison experiment. And it was like everybody's performance was like on 10. And it was one of those movies where nobody was like half selling it. Like, everybody had to fully, like, it was full send from everybody. Especially like Ezra Miller's character is insanely, it's like, he's so intense that, like, what he's going through, and Michael Angarano's character is like the polar opposite. He's like inflicting the pain, and they both do such a good job. Like, I'm a huge fan of that movie, man.
Well, the craziest thing too is that, like, Dr. Zimbardo, Professor Zimbardo, he was, there and, contributing as well. So it's such a strange thing. I mean, I don't know if I've ever had it in my career before where you literally have the guy involved, and I mean, he was
right.
at the premiere at Sundance, like, he was there on stage with us, and, it was this true story. And I really don't think there's ever been a movie I've done like that where you actually get to meet the real person who was responsible for this whole ordeal.
Yeah. For you, what movies have you worked on that the final product you were like super happy with? Because you've worked in a lot of stuff. Like, I was looking at your IMDb before we came on to like refresh myself on a lot of the stuff you've been in. You've been in a lot of movies, dude, that I totally had I did not realize that you were in so many movies, and you've got a couple things coming out. But as far as stuff that you have done already, like, what are some of the things that you've done that you really like? You there?
Sorry, I froze. But as far as stuff
what are some of the things that you've done that you really like the final movie? Because I know that's a hard thing sometimes. Like, you do your part, but you don't have any control over how things are cut and how the final thing. What's some of the movies that you've done that you really like? The final product.
I think as far as being really impressed by the final product, It Follows is number one for me, just in terms of like how chaotic and difficult of a shoot it was, and how sort of in the dark we were about how it was going to turn out. That was a tiny movie, $500,000 budget, which is very little.
That's
and you're like, I remember just, that movie, I honestly didn't know if it was ever going to see the light of day, because I've had other movies in that scale that just never make it, Everybody hustled super hard, but it was like, you just don't know. And then on top of that, then I remember I saw it without the final score, seeing it with the score, I was like, oh, this is really good, but you don't know if other people are going to respond well. And then all of a sudden it was like, it went to Cannes, and then went to Sundance, and then, you know, it went to Toronto, and I was like, holy shit, people are responding to this weird little movie I did in Detroit. That one was really impressive, and I still, you know, go back to that every once in a while and watch it because I also love horror. Yeah, I mean, Stanford turned out great, but I always knew Stanford was, you know, like, it always felt like, you know, you knew what you were going to see in the final product. But definitely It Follows is the biggest surprise in terms of like, oh my God, okay, this is a great film.
I haven't seen that, but I'm gonna go watch it now.
Oh, dude, it's fun. It's like, you know, it's a weird little horror movie that it's basically a nightmare that you're living through. It's just so strange. And then it's kind of a funny story. It was, you know, a movie I did when I was 17, and that was really close and personal. And you know, that movie turned out so great, and that's still really close to my heart. I mean, like, I was basically going through what the main character was going through as well, just contemplating suicide and dealing with severe depression for someone my age. And so to see that come out the way it did, and, you know, I still think too, Zach Galifianakis is so great in that film.
So as far as like, because you started acting so young, and not everybody on earth gets their career so early in life, you still like doing it? Is it like, are you still happy that this is where you're at with your career, like your career choice, I guess?
Oh, I mean, I didn't ever necessarily see myself doing this beyond childhood. So the fact that I'm still able to make my living doing it is incredible. I think the way my career shaped itself, you know, I'm very picky, and I, you know, definitely haven't gone for the money necessarily. And I'm sure I could have had a much easier career in that way, you know, like really just gone for the big blockbusters or whatever. But I really, I'm stoked. I mean, I can't express how awesome it is to be able to have this be my bread and butter. But at the same time, like, you know, it's different for me. I think I get, at times, you know, I might be a little more impatient, probably more than I should be, just because I've spent so many hours of my life on set, you know, even, you know, my girlfriend's an actor too. And, you know, I think for her, sometimes I totally get it. Like, I'll come back and be like, oh my God, that was a fucking 15-hour day. Oh my God. Like, I just, you know, I could have been out there, you know, 4 hours out of there 4 hours earlier, and it was so much. And she thankfully reminds me, she's like, dude, look what you're complaining about. Like, this is just pretty awesome. But I do think I have, you know, at times it's like, you know, for me, it's weird. It's a weird relationship. I mean, I grew up on set. It's always from age 10, you know, so I have a little less patience at times. And I
get it.
Yeah. So
totally
it's a weird relationship, basically.
Yeah. I'm happy to hear that you still like that you like what you do, though. That's awesome. Because I think, I mean, you hear so much about like kids who grow up in Hollywood and on set and stuff. And, you know, it can be like a super weird life. And it seems like because you were choosy, you got to kind of skirt a lot of that weird, you know, Drew Barrymore kind of weird young life, you know?
Well, that's the weird, you know, the thing too is that I think my parents, I do thank them a lot for that, because I mean, initially when it came up like, oh, this Asian wants to meet with Keir and whatever, they were immediately like, I don't know, this is bad. They knew about child actors. They're both like really into film. So they were like, we don't want like some situation of, you know, him falling into drugs and, you know, ruining his life and stuff like that. And they were super hard on that, you know, just really, really protected me every step of the way. So I got really lucky, because I mean, even kids I grew up with, it's sad to say, like a lot of the kids I grew up with are not in good places now, you know.
I've lived in LA since the mid 90s. And so my kids grew up around kids that were in the industry. And yeah, it's like, it can be a weird thing. And I, you know, cheers to your parents for that, because every single one of my kids' friends who were actors, the ones who weren't complete shit kids, all had parents who were looking out for them the whole time and were not just trying to cash in on their kid, you know, making some money. And so, you know, it's one of those weird things about this town that you just, you know, it really, this town is really driven by the industry. But most of the industry, 99.9% of the industry, is just regular working people. You know what I mean? So it's like, it's rare actually that you run into like weird Hollywood types. Like, it happens, but probably for you, it happens a lot more because you have to go to a lot of auditions and all kinds of stuff like that. But for the most part, like, everybody's, you know, I actually started working in, I worked on the film Palm Springs, that came out during the pandemic.
Oh, cool.
Doing like graphic design. Like, I designed all of did you see that movie?
Yeah. I enjoyed it.
The beer that he's constantly drinking through the whole thing, I designed all the packaging for that. My friend designed, another guy that I know designed the actual can label, and then I designed the 12-pack box, like all of the like advertising anywhere that was in it. There's like some shirts that some bouncers in the bar were wearing that I designed and stuff. So, and then I've started doing that same kind of work for TV commercials over the last year or so. It's obviously slowed down because of the pandemic, but I've started working again, doing that as well. And so, you know, again, like, you know, this industry is just a lot, the vast majority is just, you know, regular working people. And so, you know, probably a little different experience for you because, you know, your talent. And so people will probably just want to blow smoke up your ass all the time.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think too, there's just also people who, you know, they're doing what they're doing, whatever sketchy stuff, and they want to kind of pull you in because they're like, oh, you're part of the club now, you know, like we can both, you know, you can be part of this thing. And so it's been kind of hard because like I do keep a lot of distance from people like that. We work and then I go home and whatever. But like, as far as the crew, for example, like I've met some of the best people ever. And I mean, in fact, a lot of my music connections have been through crew people too, you know, like I've met some of the best, like coolest people, you know, and it is like you're saying, it's like 99% of the people that are there are great people just living their lives and, you know, feeding their families. And then you've got like these few people at the top that every once in a while you come into contact with and you're like, yeah, these are bad vibes. So I'm going to avoid you. You know, I just politely avoid them. I'm like, okay, you know, no thanks. I don't want to come to another party of yours. I went to one. It was weird. Let's move on. But, you know, most people are great. And I think it's unfortunate that the film industry as a whole gets kind of this bad rep because it's like people don't realize how many people are involved in everything, you know, like every production has hundreds of people.
Right.
And the majority of them are great, you know,
just normal, regular working people, you know? Yeah. And then, you know, I did art department for a little while, probably 10 years ago too. And so, you know, I've dipped my toes in it here and there. And then, you know, obviously Christy's daily, you know, that's how she makes her living. So, you know, I'm kind of, you know, a lot of our friends are also in the industry and stuff. And, you know, it's just, yeah, like you said, like it can get it's like, ooh, Hollywood. And it's like, people who have never been here don't understand how not like it is they think it is. You know,
I think
it can be.
People who are like disappointed. I think people actually show up wanting that sometimes. Like friends of mine from back home who like finally get to LA and they're like, ooh, I want to get into this whole dirty world that I've seen. And I'm like, it doesn't exist as much as you think, you know, like it's really like, you know, at the end of the day on set, most people are just going home and sleeping as much as is possible.
Exactly, because you work, you know, 15 hours a day and you have to be back at work at 5 a.m. and you're leaving work at like 10 at night. Like, you know, there is not a lot, it's not a lot of time for debauchery.
Yeah. I mean, I definitely think if anything, like film festivals have been the most debauchery I've gotten into at a younger age. Like that's where it's like, all money people, all whatever, and you're just like, let's party and whatever and that. But like as for actual day-to-day set, it's sometimes almost more mundane than people would probably want to know. It's pretty boring. It's a lot of sitting around.
Totally. There's a lot of sitting around for everybody. Which is another thing that's funny is it's like there's a lot of hurry up and wait in Hollywood where you just bust your ass for like a certain amount of time and then you just have to wait for other stuff to happen before you can work again. And that kind of is every department too, you know. It's like hurry, and then it's your turn. You know, and then they're shooting and all the hair and makeup are waiting, all the art department's waiting, you know, everybody's waiting around for the next thing. And then, you know, the set is a very strange, it's a strange world, unlike anything else I've ever experienced in a working sense.
Yeah, it's weird too. I mean, I describe it at times as like also, you know, the first week is so high school in a weird way for a bunch of professors. Like you go to the lunch and you're like, who do I sit with? Like, I'm not really friends with anyone yet. And every shoot's I think a lot of people too, their job, like they'll work with the same people for 5-10 years and they know them well. But like, it's weird for us because every job is like, you might know maybe a couple people, but it's like a brand new world every time. Like I've rarely worked with the same people over and over.
Yeah. I like I said, I'm glad to hear that you still like it. As far as actors are concerned, there can't be a lot of other ones who listen to the type of music we listen to. It's mostly crew, right?
Yeah. And so funny enough, not many actors, but for one example, we were just talking about Ezra Miller. He walked up to me the first time we met and was like, "Oh, you like Nausea? You know, the Crust Band, and you like this and that." And so he listened to that stuff. And so we became friends because of that, weirdly enough. And he was like, check out this grindcore compilation I just got on vinyl. We got to listen to it. That's one of the only times. And then I have one friend, Spencer, who we met recently, and he's like an actor, and he's on like Better Call Saul and stuff. And he plays in a power violence band, and that's it pretty much. Like,
what band?
They're called Compassion. They're really good.
Are they LA based?
No, they're New York.
Oh, okay.
So he's a New York actor. But yeah, I mean, like for the most part, maybe some people have heard of punk or like they've heard of Minor Threat, but like people actually like
Blink 182.
Yeah, no, I mean most actors are not into like, you know, heavy music, but there's been a couple, you know, but yeah, it's mostly the crew. It's usually like, you know, sound people or whatever. I'll see a t-shirt and be like, oh shit, is that a Converge shirt or whatever? And that's usually how it starts, but it's very rare, very rare.
So like I kind of alluded to, like you for a long time, you didn't really talk about your musical taste that much, like in public, based, you know, kind of for career reasons. Since you started talking about that more, has it been an issue at all? Like, has it been a thing at all?
Yeah, I mean, I think I didn't talk about it for so long too because I was worried, you know, people would be like, oh, what is this stuff that Keir likes? And then look it up and be like, whoa, there's someone getting beheaded on the fucking album cover, or like, you know, this is really political, or this is, you know what I mean? Like, you know, talking about whatever it is. But actually, since I kind of decided like, fuck it, people are figuring it out. I knew people were figuring it out. There's only so long I could go, you know. And I was like, well, at least I can kind of, you know, this guy, Brad, who I met through mutual friends, he wrote that article for Bandcamp, and he was kind of like, you know, his thing was like, hey, I'm not trying to tell you what to do, but do you want to maybe take control of this yourself? And then you can be the one to present this instead of letting people assume these things about you. And It's been great since then. It's been like so many people have been really supportive, and people from bands have been like, whoa, you know, I've made all these connections with people, or even, you know, directors and people in film that like also like this stuff, or so I think it made me realize like, oh, I don't know what I was afraid of. I mean, you know, I was never raised to be afraid of what people thought of me anyway, but it's actually turned out better than I could ever imagine. So yeah, I really don't know what it was that stopped me for so many years. I think I was just in my head.
Yeah, no, people have a reaction. People have a reaction to the kind of stuff that we do just based on the imagery. You know, they assume that, oh, that's satanic, and then they assume that that must be what you are like. You know, like because they just bring their own ideas of what all of that dark kind of imagery has connected to it, and there's oftentimes a very visceral reaction to that kind of stuff just based on the way North American culture is. And so I think it was fair of you to be a little bit cautious about that, because you don't ever know. And I know for me, like when I was raising my kids, because my middle son is the same age as you. And so when I was raising my kids, when they were like, little kids, and I had to be around other parents, and I was like this skateboard guy with Cannibal Corpse t-shirt or whatever, like it was a lot of explaining. It was a lot of explaining in my life about all the stuff that I was into. And so, I kind of get it from that aspect for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I get it. Like to some people, it might be offensive, and let's be real. Like the point is to grab your attention. Like I like this art and I like this stuff because it's extreme. It's in your face. It doesn't compromise. It doesn't make room for your feelings. It's like, here it is. So I totally understand. But, I think once most people end up talking to you, like you're saying, you do a little explaining and they're like, oh, is that like, you actually would burn a church down? I'm like, no, I wouldn't personally burn a church down. I just think it's cool, like whatever. Like, it's like, people don't, I understand why they're afraid, and I can't,
right. No,
blame them. I can't blame them.
Yeah. The funny thing is that, we're into this kind of music, and then, that you're in a band, so you're playing with other bands, and these are the people that you're around all the time. And every single one of my best friends who are in all these crazy, like huge, gnarly death metal bands, they're all hilarious and like the nicest people you would ever want to hang around with. Not one, like 1 in 1,000 people in all of my life of being involved in the scene was some kind of asshole who took themselves too seriously. Everybody else is just it's just a giant kid trying to have fun with their life. And it just so happens that, we're all like basically like a living horror movie. You know what I mean? And it's like, it's all fun. Everybody's fun. It's just funny that people seem to think that, it's like anything else. It's like you had mentioned that your dad kind of exited punk rock when hardcore came in a little bit. And I was getting in when hardcore became a thing, and I was in that first generation of hardcore punk kids. And back then, in TV shows and movies, like it was before they had decided that all the bad guys were going to be black gang members. It was all the bad guys were always punk rockers. Like even in even in Terminator, like in the beginning, like there are punk rockers hassling Arnold Schwarzenegger. I never met any punks who ever did shit like that. It's like, on TV shows, it was always like the punk rocker on the bus, like spitting on the old lady. I never met a punk who did that stuff. And so culture in America for a long time, punk rockers were just criminals. Like punks were criminals. Heavy metal guys were thugs and criminals. And so I understand it from that standpoint of having been young enough to watch all of this stuff come into existence, and how blackballed all of it got by, mainstream society. If you were my kid and you were in the same position, I probably would have advised you to be careful about that too, just from my own experience. But I'm glad that you're having a positive experience with it, man. That's totally awesome.
Yeah, no, when I started dating Michelle, like, the most, my girlfriend, the most she had seen was Rancid at Coachella, and, knew like Blink-182 and, some stuff like that. And so she didn't really, yeah. And then it was like all of a sudden this very extreme culture that I was deeply involved in. And then also like meeting all my film and like acting friends and stuff like that. And like these connections. And it was funny because, yeah, I think it was a little startling at first, but then she always says the funny thing is she likes my metal hardcore friends. She's like, they're the loveliest people I've ever met. Like, all, like, love all these people. Like, they're all scary to look at, but like, you get to know them. They're like so sweet and so kind. And, you know, I've been so great to her. And like, and then it's funny, like, you know, not all, but like some of my acting friends, she's like, hey, I could honestly I'll take the metal and punk people over a lot of the like actors, you know. And so, yeah, I think, you know, all it takes is kind of getting to know some people who are into this stuff. And then you realize, you know, but I also realize like what, you know, if my face is all over and it's Netflix and people are seeing it, most of those people are not going to take the time to understand that side of things. And, so, you know, but again, like I said, it's been really positive, and if anything has been great. Like, you know, there have been people reaching out that I've been fans of for a long time and saying like, hey, can we do this? Can we do that? Next time my band comes through, it'd be cool to get you guys on. And so it's been awesome. So I'm really glad I finally came out, quote unquote.
Yeah, right. Yeah, Chrissy's the same way. Like, you know, she hadn't been around a ton of that stuff, and when and I was still in D.I.S. when we first started dating, and so, you know, she would come out to see us play and stuff. Like at the beginning, you know, when you're first dating somebody, they're like willing to go the extra mile. And so she'd never really been around a lot of that stuff. You know, I was taking her to shows in Boyle Heights and, you know, stuff like that. And then she was like, everybody's so nice. Like everybody looks scary, but everybody's so nice and friendly. And it was like, so totally similar experience that Michelle had. That's amazing. So did I hear that Atypical, this is like the last season for Atypical?
Yes, this is it. One more, and then season 4 will be the end.
That feels like a logical stepping off point for the characters in the storyline. I actually really like that show a lot, and one of the things that I've heard from people on like my Facebook page and stuff, I you know, people who have talked about it without knowing, you know, that I have any, you know, my wife has any involvement in it. And it seems like, and I'm sure you must have heard this as well, that families that have special needs kids seem to really, really, really appreciate that show exists.
Yeah. I mean, it's of course I knew going into it that like this is a very important show for, you know, especially the autism community, and all the intersectional, you know, parts that go with that. But I think, you know, of everything I've done, it's been so surreal because, you know, I'm aware that like maybe the show, you know, I'm hoping the show will really be important to those people. But like the times I've run into people on the street and they've just like, often too, it's like parents of kids on the spectrum just start like crying, you know, and I mean, it's hard to really even get my head around when like you have like a mother of somebody who's sobbing because she's like, this show is, you know, so important to our family, and maybe even their kid is finally taking interest in something and finally feels represented. And it's kind of hard to get my head around. I think I kind of suppressed it at times where I'm just like, okay, I'm just doing my job, but like, you know, it's a hard thing to sort of realize that like, you know, that the show is so important to people.
Yeah, I bet, man. I bet it is, and I think it's cool that it isn't lost on you. That people reaching out to you is, you know, something that, you know, that you appreciate, because, you know, you just never know. You never know how things are going to go. And, you know, I think I like the show. It's a show that I would like if I didn't know you and my wife didn't work on it. And, you know, one of the things that's really cool about it is at the end of every season, everybody gets together for the wrap party. And it's like, it really is like a big family of people who've been on that show for all these seasons. And, I think we're going to definitely miss that this year, you know, getting together with everybody at the end and, you know, and hanging out. But Yeah, good show. It's a good show, and our my family's little contribution to it. We're all proud of it for sure.
Oh yeah, I mean, and I'm bummed to hear that she's not going to be back. And but I guess even if we were, it's like it's going to be such a different process of shooting, and unfortunately, but that is what it is. But yeah, no, I mean that show's been such a huge part of my life now since I think I was like 23 when I started it.
Yeah, well,
and it's wild to have like grown along this show and these people. Yeah, no, I was like, I do think it's so cool, like to get to do even like 4 seasons of a show and get to know people over years and like watch everybody else's lives change and your life change and, people come and go. But, the show will always have a huge place in my heart. Yeah. I mean, it's definitely probably the most important thing I've done, I would say.
Yeah, I mean, you kind of got the same thing with the United States of Tara too, because you were on that show for a long time too. So you've gotten that a couple times where you got like multiple season shows, and that must be like kind of a cool way to live your life on a certain level. You get these extra families.
Yeah, well, and like growing up on those shows, like with US of Tara, like I was 15 when I started that show, like. I was a child, like it's wild. And then when I left, I was 18, like when the show ended. And like, that was a weird, like it followed along in this weird arc of my life. And then this too is like, I'm 28 now. I was 24, sorry, when I started, I think. And again, kind of like I was a child, and now I'm such a different person. And, it's a weird thing to do series. Again, I guess that's series versus movies as well.
So I was looking at your IMDb. You have a couple films coming out pretty soon.
Yeah. I think The Education of Frederick Fitzel is one movie that I'm not sure exactly when it's coming out, but that's coming out soon. Super weird, like cool, wild kind of drug trip of a movie. I did a few years ago, and I have this movie. There's a few. What else? What is coming out? Sorry, I'm gonna check.
There was one that was like a thriller. I can't remember the name of it. It looked pretty intense.
Yeah, I think is that. 1 second.
Yeah, no.
This is so bad. It's like weird because you do stuff and then it's like years go by and then you finally like. Oh, an Intrusion? Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah.
Yeah, that one was cool because it's a friend of mine directed, Nick Holland. Met him through the scene, through music.
Oh wow!
And then found out he was also a feature director. He was doing this new feature, and he was in this awesome band called Sunlight Spain that I really liked. It's like black and grindcore. Awesome band. He's in a band called Wounded Touch now. And so he hit me up and was like, "Hey, could we work together?" And was like, "Okay, cool." And he, did this thing. So I went and did that, and that's coming out. But again, it's hard to know when anything's coming out because it's like everything's so up in the air. And
yeah, totally, dude. Yeah, that's like that weird thing. Like even as an artist, like you sit and you make things, and then you send them off to whoever they're for, and then they go out and they live their life outside of you, and you never know where they're going to go or when things are going to be released, or and then like you're walking around in Amsterdam and you see somebody wearing a t-shirt that you designed like 5 years ago and you're like, what? Okay, I forgot I do these things, and they go out into the world and they do all the things that they do, or somebody's like, oh, you were in that band, and it's like it's just weird, like when you those things. So I can kind of relate a little bit to where you're coming from with that, like, oh, I did that thing, oh, there it is.
Well, yeah, especially with like film and stuff, because like it just sometimes it, for no one's fault at all, it just like takes forever for it to come out. I mean, even Atypical, we usually shoot about a year before usually about a year before it comes out. And then sometimes people will be like, "Oh, yo, I love that episode where you did this," and you're like, "Right, I need to rewatch that." Like,
you're like, that was a
in
year
a minute,
ago, man.
Yeah. That was same where I have a short attention span too, so it's hard for me to remember things even a year later at times, which is it's definitely my bad.
Yeah. Do you watch all the stuff that you're in?
Yeah, I watch all of it. I used to not when I was a kid because that would just put me in a really deep depression.
Because
being self-conscious.
You wanted to do it better, or you didn't do it right. Yeah, I could totally
understand.
Yeah,
I mean, also imagine all your awkward years as a teenager. You know, sometimes you see a picture from 6 months before, and you're like, "Wow, I was hideous," and like awkward as fuck. And so like you just kind of avoid things. So I didn't, but now I've gotten better about it, and I watch everything, and then I'll revisit like, every once in a while I'll be like, "Oh, I haven't seen that in forever," and so I'll just kind of revisit and like check it out again.
Do you feel like you learned something by rewatching?
Yeah.
Anything about what it is you do, Yeah.
I think it's important to rewatch. Again, I used to not, mainly because it would just really set off my mental health would just sort of plummet. But now I think as you get older, ideally your confidence goes up, and it's important to, especially if I'm doing like a series, like I'm going back from the season of Atypical, I got to go back and like just check in and be like, what did I do? Where was I at? And then like we continue from there. And sometimes it's also just fun to just sort of go, wow, look at that. Like for me at this point, I'm like, wow, that was 10 years ago or whatever it is. It's kind of just fun.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's like that for a lot of creative people in their endeavors. Like you go back and listen to a record that you recorded way back, or some piece of art that I made that I'm like, oh yeah, I remember that was like super cool, like and it takes you kind of back to where you were at that time and what was going on. And yeah, I think that there's some growth that can be had out of revisiting old output, no matter what it is. You know what I mean? Like, and as human beings, I think it's important. I think it's an important thing to always kind of try to move forward, as a human being,
Yeah, no, I mean, every once in a while, like listen to an old album and I'll be like a demo, and I'm like, man, this is fucking sick. Like, damn, we were pretty good for, like how much we've been playing together at the time, or like even watching like live footage, like shit, we actually killed that. That was pretty cool. Like, because it's easy to just sort of belittle, I think, your past accomplishments in your head and be like, oh, I wasn't that good back then, or, we were kids. And it's kind of cool to just go, you know what, this was actually pretty cool,
Yeah, and at the time you're always like, oh, I was having so much fun. I was having the time of my goddamn life doing that, especially with being in a band and playing music. Like it's just so much fun, and you're always around such fun people. And like, I mean, it can be a bummer when you're touring, just because that's such a gnarly grind being on tour. But by the time, it's time to hit the stage and all that, it's like back to being fun again. It's like once you're out of the van and you stretched your legs and had something to eat, it's always way more fun again. And you end up with stories, and I wish more people could experience what it's like to be in kind of the underground music scene, because it's just such a blast.
Oh yeah, and all those little side stories you get from just random like fuck ups and disasters that at the time you're like, oh my god, like this is the worst thing that could have ever happened, and then you like look back and you're like, that was pretty funny. Like, I don't know, I know a lot of people that don't really go outside their comfort zone much, and it's like a DIY tour is truly the most out of your comfort zone. There's nothing comfortable about it. Like, you're not comfortable in the van. No. You're not comfortable during the set. You're not comfortable sleeping on the couch or the floor, after. But I always say, like, my favorite memories, not my best memories, but my favorite memories are like the worst experiences. Like, those are my favorite ones to retell or reminisce. And like the low points to me are kind of the most fun. Whereas I could say, oh, I had a great year and like it was chill, but it's not really fun to kind of go back and and explore. So I always like to push myself into uncomfortable situations as much as possible.
It's like, remember that time we all almost died?
Yeah. No, yeah. I'll be like, oh, remember the time I was backpacking and we ran out of food 4 days in Sequoia, and like we thought we were gonna die and this and that, and it's like it's always.
Oh, that's awesome, man. I'm gonna let you go. I appreciate you taking the time to come on and talk with me, man. It's been really cool.
No,
It's been cool
me.
catching up and like listening to you talk about your career a little bit. It's been awesome.
I'm honored to be here, and thank you so much for having me. And yeah, this is great.
Cool, man. We'll talk again soon, Keir.
Cool.